There were some numbers that I think was in this report around, so we understand the awareness around what people's knowledge of the what increases cancer risk and those percentages that you mentioned to Matthew. But what kind of numbers are we seeing across the board with what amount of cancer cases, for example, are attributed to alcohol use?
Yes, so this report gave numbers for both cancer cases in the United States as well as worldwide. So the numbers that it gave for the US are that alcohol contributes to nearly 100,000 cancer cases and about 20,000 cancer deaths each year. And then if we look at worldwide numbers, it contributes to about 741,000 cases worldwide in a year. And for that aspect of the report, they're referring to the numbers for the year of 2020. And again, this is just not something that people are very aware of. So they're trying to highlight the significance of this by highlighting some of those numbers. And if we also look specifically into maybe the actual relationship between alcohol and cancer, the report highlighted an increased risk, or sorry, an actually a causal relationship between alcohol and specific types of cancer. And this actually might be part of the disconnect that we're seeing in that 45% number, where, again, we know alcohol is going to have some negative health impacts, but drawing that direct link to cancer involves a bit of explanation for that. And where we can start first is with the different types of cancer that this report found are linked to alcohol use. So the report found that consuming alcohol increases the risk of developing at least 7 types of cancer. And the 7 forms of cancer that it focused on were cancers of the mouth, so the more oral cavity part of the mouth, the throat or the pharynx, the larynx, which is where vocal cords are, the esophagus, breast cancer, liver cancer, as well as colorectal cancer. So those were the main 7 that it found alcohol is going to be directly linked to increasing the risk of developing those forms of cancer.
There was a key word in there that uh, you mentioned beforehand. For anybody that's not aware, can you explain the difference between a causal and a correlation between two different pieces? So in this case, you mentioned causal relationship between alcohol use and increased risk for these types of cancer. Can you explain the causal piece just briefly?
Yes, so this is very important. Where sometimes in research we'll do more of what we think of as like an observational type of research, where we look at just things that are happening, and we might see that there's a correlation between one thing and another. Can't think of an example off the top of my head, but let's say we notice that as A increases, B also increases at the same time. If there is a correlation, this does not mean that one causes the other, but it means that we do notice that there is a pattern between the two things. With this report, it is a step further than that, where we found it was causal. So we found that alcohol causes an increased rate of these types of cancers. And the report also laid out, and we'll get into this later, but the report also laid out specific causal relationships in terms of how this happens. So, how we know that it is a direct link from the alcohol to the increased cancer risk versus just these two things are correlated or two things go up together. So, if this were more of a correlation, we would say that as someone drinks more alcohol or a certain amount of alcohol, we are also seeing an increase in the amount of or the risk of cancer. But this study, like I said, found a causal link where there are actually 4 specific ways we'll talk about that it says these cancers are caused by alcohol.
Yeah, I think of all the fun examples of the difference between causal and observational or correlations. If it's raining outside and everybody eats more popcorn when it's raining outside, the causal relationship is not that rain makes people eat more popcorn. Maybe when it rains outside, people aren't going outside, they're staying inside to watch movies, and then when they watch movies, they eat popcorn. Rain doesn't equal popcorn, but it indirectly gets there somehow. Much different for something that's causal, where like what we're talking about here.